IVM.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Uncle Please Sit. I'm Joel Pereira, and with me as always is Tushar Abhichandani, my buddy and also co-host on this podcast. Tushar, what's up?
How's it going, Joel? Nothing much, the usual, as it has been for the last 6 months, which is also the start of every single one of our podcasts.
I think the only difference that I can feel now, like when I'm at home, which is where I am all the time, is the difference in my perceived difference in temperature. Like for instance, it was hot 3 months ago, then it was wet, then now it's not wet anymore. Now, things are drier. And I was like, okay, things are cooling down. That is the only change that I've seen in my life over the past 6 months, the weather. Much. And it's not even like we're going out and experiencing weather, right? We're just seeing it from the window.
From the window, yeah. But let's reintroduce our guest again for part two of this podcast.
Yeah, this week we are doing something that we've never done before. We had Anupam Manur, who is an assistant professor of economics at the Takshila Institute. And last week we were talking about a brief history of Indian economic policy, and we just got into it.
Not to be so brief.
Yeah, we got into it, and we were going decade by decade, and I, like a fool, was like, oh yeah, we'll finish this in an hour. And then we were like, okay, we need to do a part two of this episode. And basically that's what we're doing right now. Anupam, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, before we sort of jump in today, let's do a quick recap of what we sort of spoke about last time. So first we spoke about the Nehruvian era, which is around 1947 to 1964, where the focus was on capacity building to a certain extent. There were obviously lots of socialist policies as well. There was also the fear of the outside corporations coming in. So we were somewhat closed. I mean, not somewhat, actually, fairly closed in what we were doing. Agriculture was in the doldrums. And we had to rely on outside aid for our food requirements and a lot of our other requirements. Then came the Indira Gandhi era, which was the era of absolute control, the era when the era that bureaucrats look at as the golden years, when they had all the power in the country. Where
bureaucrats gone wild.
We had, of course, the good thing we had in the middle of all that was the Green Revolution, which finally made India food independent, at least in terms of the food that it required. Then we also had the whole Indira phase, which basically also created the license quota Raj, bank nationalization, basically everything that you could think of that would ruin the economy by and large.
So basically every bad thing that you think Nehru did
it was
actually Indira Gandhi. That's just to put it.
Yeah, and then as Indira goes, there's Rajiv Gandhi. Rajiv Gandhi tries to open up things. He does succeed in small measure. He does open up certain things, but he also is not able to sort of go into the levels that India needs to go into to attain a certain degree of growth. So that's where we are at. And by the end of this, by the time we finished last time at around 1991, where the crisis was just about to hit the economy and something that changed the economy forever. So that is what we will be discussing on this episode, 1991 and beyond, right after this small break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Want to wish you all a happy Diwali. Hope you had a great festive season. It's been a great week in terms of the kinds of guests we've had and the kind of conversations we've had on the network this week. Do definitely check some of these things out. On This Round's on Me with Gauri Devidayal. She had a great conversation with Garima Arora, who's one of the best-known chefs in the world. It was just absolutely riveting. Do check that out. On States of Anarchy, Hamsini Hariharan spoke about chronicling India's different wars. Again, really interesting episode. Check that out. Ashton had a very interesting episode on his show, The Habit Coach. It was called I Don't Feel Like Doing Anything. It's about how to overcome malaise just generally, and I thought really, really interesting stuff. Kumi Veana was the guest on Cyrus Says on Monday's episode last week, and she's an educator, and my God, it was such a fascinating conversation talking about the way education functions in India and some of the changes she'd like to see. Just really, really interesting stuff. Do give that a listen. On Uncle Please Sit, Anupam Manur was there with Joel and Tushar talking about the Indian economy, part one of a two-part series. Second part will be out this week. You should definitely check that out. Lastly, I want to talk to you all about the Filter Coffee podcast. Karthik Nagarajan, who hosts that show, was on a little bit of a break, he's back with a banger of an episode. It is with Himura Maya, who used to run Landmark Stores, and they talk about the culture of bookstores and quizzing and all kinds of stuff. Really interesting conversation. Do check that out. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
And we are back. Welcome back to Uncle. Please sit. With us, of course, is Anupam Manur, who is a assistant professor of economics at the Takshila Institution. Also with me, of course, is Tushar, as he's just there all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Before we took this break, we were talking about where we have reached. Okay, and Anupam, correct me if I'm wrong, but like let's say 1991, like we spoke the last time, we had to literally put our gold on a plane to guarantee our economy.
Ship, we couldn't afford a plane.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, jeez. Awesome. This is one step above like porters with like the gold on their heads walking towards the bank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
and we
caravan.
were that's the gold route.
Yeah.
And we were mortgaging our gold. We had the Hindu rate of growth, which was, as it was called, which is just plateaued out at like 2 to 3%, and we were regarded as a basket case by pretty much the rest of the world. Is this a fair assessment?
So just one more thing to add to that. So just as this crisis hits, just before that, what were the immediate events that precipitated this crisis?
Yeah. So again, just very, very, very brief build up to 91. You had, as I said, there were a few changes happening with Rajiv Gandhi. For instance, I think if you had to take one particular kind of event to showcase a whole bunch of things is the launch of the Maruti car. Right?
Okay.
Maruti was, again, the state-owned kind of endeavor at first, and this was Rajiv Gandhi's big kind of Sanjay Gandhi more, but under this Rajiv Gandhi administration, but it was his pet project, Sanjay Gandhi's pet project, that he wanted to have a modern car. So until then, you had only the Ambassador, of course, which was it was the Ambassador. It was not necessarily known for its looks. Let's put it that way. So you wanted a car that was affordable for the middle class in India, which was just about growing. And you wanted a car that, but they decided that the government should do it. Multiple failed attempts, a lot of controversy, a lot of money gone in various ways and various other pockets. And of course, it didn't really succeed in any way at the first, right? And then finally they said, okay, we can't do it on our own. And a lot of money, government money wasted. And I have to emphasize on that, a lot of government money wasted, which is symbolic of that era. I mean, that's the reason I'm saying it. And then finally they decided that, okay, we can't do this on our own. So let's get in a tie-up with Suzuki from Japan, and then we'll do the car together. But nonetheless, I think when the first Maruti car rolled out, which was the Maruti 800, the legendary Maruti 800, it was still, a public-private partnership of sorts. It was still the first car in India, which was, in a major way supposed to be for the Indian public. I mean, you had a few others there, right? At that point of time, you had probably Fiat premium
Ambassador,
of course. But these were not still widely available. The idea with the Maruti was that it was meant for the public, and after a few failed attempts and a lot of money wasted, it actually came about. So that kind of symbolizes the 80s, right? A lot of money wasted. Government didn't have that much money, but there was signs of change. At least they didn't say we have to do it all on our own. They learned their lessons and said, okay, we'll get into collaboration.
Okay, Anupam, if there's one place that I can interject over here, I will. Like, at least auto is one place that I have some. It's like something I used to do. And if you look at the private sector at that time, that was not like, a shining beacon of modernity anyways. There was the Hindustan Ambassador, which was like 4 decades old. There was the Contessa, which was again like a terribly built car. And then there was the privates like the Bajajes and, so on and so forth. So, the last time you were talking about how the government would put restrictions on industry. Was this also a symptom of that, or was the private sector just so complacent that they didn't care?
It's actually a wonderful combination of the two. But by and large, it is because that sloppy kind of work by the private sector can again be attributed to the restrictions placed by the government. So one, as I mentioned in the previous episode, there was something called the MRTP Act, which actually restricted how many you could manufacture. Now, if you don't have incentives to manufacture as much as there is demand and make a profit out of that, then why would you build a nice car which can be bought by millions? You can't sell millions. You can sell, a fixed quota each month, and that quota will anyway get filled up. So you don't have to innovate. You don't have to compete. So there's no incentive for you to really go out and, build a wonderful car, right? That is part A. Part B, there was a whole bunch of import restrictions as well. So if you wanted to build a car, let's say, and part of that required you to import high quality motor parts, right? Or a lot of auto accessories you had to import. But you wouldn't be allowed to import. So you had to only build with what you could get. And therefore, if you could only get cheap quality material, then you would build a cheap quality car, right? So there was import restrictions. And third, and I think very importantly, because there were import restrictions of not just auto parts, but also of fully built vehicles from outside. So you couldn't import cars from outside. So the Indian industry were completely complacent, as in they had no competition. Right? And in fact, it was Bajaj. Now, many times hailed. Bajaj was originally part of this thing called the Bombay Plan, by the way. Yeah. And the Bombay Plan basically had a whole bunch of industrialists who supported the government, saying that we should not be importing things from outside because, of course, it helped them, right? So all of this comes together as to why the auto industry was terrible in the 80s.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So that's the 80s, and we're leading up to, so Rajiv Gandhi on one hand attempts these modernization plans, doesn't always kick off because these, many of these things take a lot of time, but at the same time, GDP growth falls, right? It's not doing very well. So Rajiv Gandhi wants a big push, start spending a lot. Right, start spending a lot, and therefore you have huge fiscal deficit in India. So government doesn't have money, private sector is not doing very well. We are trying to import things. All of this leads up to that 1991 crisis. Right. So I don't want to get into the complicated economic kind of equations, which tells you that there is actually a direct relationship between domestic savings, your external kind of borrowings, all of those things. Right, and essentially, if you want a one-line takeaway, economy was not doing well in the 80s. Government was profligate. You had, crisis brewing. And finally, when it comes to 1991, all hell breaks loose.
And our gold is on a ship on the way to Switzerland, or London was.
Both. Okay. So let's get to that, right? To be precise, May 30th, I think, of 1991. We've reached a stage when we say we are in dire straits. Just to give you an idea of what it means, essentially we have enough forex reserves, that is actual money to get imports, for 11 days of oil. That's it. 11 days import cover. So once that 11 days passed, we couldn't import oil. And then imagine if you couldn't get petrol and oil into your economy, then the entire economy basically comes to a standstill.
So, and also, just another global event has happened, which was the first Gulf War.
Yes. That precipitates. War. Yeah. That precipitates the entire oil kind of crisis as well. Oil prices go up, which means again, so whatever we could purchase now, we could purchase less of it. Our forex reserve starts running out in no time, and so again, we've reached the position where we have less than 11 days worth of import cover, right? And that forex reserves is generally looked at days of import cover. So we have less than 11 days of import cover. And therefore, we are really worried. So normally, how does it work? You export something that the world wants. You earn foreign exchange by exporting. You use that foreign exchange to import things.
Yeah.
Right? Now, there's nothing that we produce that the world wants, as we've kind of established in the previous episode. So we're not exporting anything that the world wants. We don't have foreign exchange. And whatever foreign exchange we have, we are running out because, a whole bunch of other things happening as well, right? So that's the situation. So come May 30th, we finally decide, okay, this can't go on. There's a very real danger or a threat that we are going to run out of oil. And therefore, we have to do something quickly. So there's a series of things that happen. One, we actually sell about 20 tons of gold, 20 metric tons of gold to Switzerland, to Union Bank of Switzerland. And that secures us a $240 million loan. right? So that's on May 30th. And then subsequently, in very quickly in the next couple of months, there's 3 more times that the first case is where we have sold gold, by the way. After that, we find that it's not enough. So we need more Forex. That is when we actually send, on that ship, secretly, by the way. It's not even, cannot be done openly, because if it is done openly, people lose confidence, right? That's like a distress sale and everyone comes to know. So they lose confidence in the economy. So,
and also the start of an amazing heist movie.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, sorry, I'll stop interrupting.
Although I don't know how amazing those heists would have been with our premier Padminis and ambassadors. Like half the people's cars would have stopped.
The getaway car is a premier Padmini which doesn't start, because of the added weight of the gold.
And someone's taking their Bajaj scooter and like putting it sideways or something.
Sideways.
Oh man.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go on.
No, I think that's that bit of levity was required for this for this thing. So you reach that time when secretly in the middle of the night, gold is actually put in containers and sent on a ship to the Bank of England, and that's the first time. And then it's sent to Bank of Japan as well. And so totally about 46 or 47 metric tons of gold is shipped out, and in return for about $400 million. So that we are set. By the way, all of this sounds dramatic, but this is, let's say, in about June, July, right? What I'm saying. By December, we buy all the gold back.
Okay.
Right? So it's just a temporary kind of blip that's there. This is pledging gold, right? So as a collateral, and we get the loan. That loan comes in handy. Our balance of payments is secure now. And once that is secure, we basically get that gold back. Right? So
basically, business model of Muthoot Finance.
Yeah, basically.
We will be beeping that out, but...
Okay.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so that's the dramatic events in 1991, and then of course there's a regime change. Narasimha Rao takes over with Manmohan Singh as the finance minister, and they launch something called the epochal budget. And it is epochal.
Epochal budget. Okay.
Yeah, so it is once in an epoch. It's a game changer. The 1991 reforms that we all know about. So that's leading up to the 91 crisis, kind of a resolution, at least temporary one, and then long-term reforms initiated, then the buyback of gold. All of that in 1991. So a very eventful year, to say the least.
So what were the big... So when reforms, exactly, what were when people use the word liberalization, what do they imply directly?
Yeah, so I think that is important, right? We tend to think of it as the simple LPG kind of thing, but what does it entail? We can go. I won't go into too much detail for the benefit of our listeners, but just to give you an overview, one of the first things that was done is the MRTP Act that was thrown out, the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices. Essentially, you removed the restrictions on how much private companies can actually produce.
No more quotas anymore.
Exactly. No more quotas, no more production quotas, no more input quotas, etc. So that was I think one of the biggest change. Then there was the change on the external front. So as I said, earlier we had all of these import restrictions, so that changed as well. What you would call as the FEMA, which is the Foreign Exchange Management Act, was now come into place. Before that, you had the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, etc. So now there was just a change of regime, which meant that they won't put such a tight control over what did you use your foreign exchange for. So in basic terms, before, as I said, if I wanted to buy a perfume from France, then I had to get government permission for it. Now it said that any current account transaction, which means that for all goods and services, I didn't need the government's permission. I could just exchange my dollars, exchange my rupee for dollars, and then buy whatever I wanted, which is a massive change, right? Yeah. So if that's, at a personal level, but more importantly, it meant that now industries had a lot more freedom in what they wanted to import as inputs into their outputs, into what they wanted to produce. So I think that was, a really big kind of change. The third, and I think this is more subtle in a way, but the entire attitude towards the licenses and inspections kind of changed, right? So some of the laws were, actively diluted in terms of how strict they were. Some other places, the laws were not diluted, but there was a very clear mandate that your bureaucrats were not supposed to go roundabouts and try to collect money, right? So the inspections, basically the money came through inspections, right? Because the laws were such that no one could ever follow all the laws, and therefore anyone could do an inspection and find out that, and accuse a company of not following laws and therefore make money out of it. So that was relaxed. So as I said, in some certain places, the actual guidelines and the rules themselves were relaxed. In certain other places, I think the bureaucrats were told to hold off, right, and let industries do their damn job. Do their job. Right? So that was another, I think, important kind of change. The third one was the relaxation of FDI and FII norms. So basically, foreign investment until now was not allowed. We spoke about the fear of foreign investment, right? About external people coming from outside and taking over our companies or investing here. That changed. So now we allowed FDI in a whole bunch of things, apart from, again, priority sectors or critical infrastructure. So telecom, insurance, banking, defense was not allowed in 1991, but a lot of other things FDI was easily allowed. So if you want to manufacture soap, for instance, cosmetics, then you were, that's when Hindustan Lever and all your P&G or et cetera came in, right? And started catering to the Indian market. So whole bunch of things, FDI was relaxed. And so was FII. FDI being foreign direct investment and FII being external investment. So the other, I think, really important thing on the external front was the liberalization of FDI and FII. So FDI, of course, meaning foreign direct investment. And so we spoke about in the previous episode of how there was this fear of foreign investment, right? That a foreigner coming and investing and owning important kind of assets in India. That kind of changed again in 1991. We allowed foreign investments to come into the country. And because of that, again, that helped us a lot, and I'll come to that later. But that FDI relaxation was very important. Now, of course, it was not in every single sector. There's still some sectors which were shut off, like, let's say, defense, telecom, banking, insurance, things that were considered critical to India's economy, still could not have foreign investment. But for most other things, like if you want to buy, if you want to invest in soap, or if you want to invest in cosmetics, or any, pens and books or whatever, all such items, I think, foreign direct investment was allowed. And then foreign portfolio investment or foreign institutional investment was allowed as well. And this is basically money going into Sensex and Nifty and, your debt, government debt. And so that's two things that were allowed. And this plays a huge part later in the 2000s. So I'm going to circle back to that later. Right. And so then that's the fourth really big thing. The fifth one is, of course, privatizing your public sector economy. So you had at least some of the public sector economies, they decided to kind of privatize, at least get that process going, which was unheard of before 91. But now you said, okay, let's start privatizing some of these things, look for investors outside. This is a very slow process, by the way. This, we're still trying to, privatize Air India. So it tells you how slow it is. 30 years later, we've still not managed to sell off Air India, but at least the thoughts of that were shown back then. So mainly, I think in 91, some of the, if I'm not mistaken, some of the mineral and coal companies, etc., were slightly privatized, but it still remains, by and large, in government control. And finally, I think we'll go into the devaluation of the rupee. And so, and I think that's an important thing, which is that until 1991, the rupee was extremely overvalued. And when I say overvalued, it's basically that, the market forces were not allowed to determine the true kind of value of the rupee, right? And RBI would set it, and there's this false pride in many countries. There's this false pride of how strong your currency is, even though it's actually harmful, by the way.
It's been an election topic in the past here. And look, our economy, our currency is going down against India's interests.
It's not. So unless it's happening because of something fundamentally wrong with the economy, then it's not a problem if your currency is devalued, right? And so, but we would artificially keep it high as a matter of pride. So as I said, even in the 70s, etc., the rupee was at 19 to the dollar, 19 rupees to the dollar. You can imagine, but That can only happen if you're exporting a lot, right? If you're exporting a lot that the world wants, then they buy rupees to pay you. So that way the value of your rupee goes up. But that was not the case. Obviously, we were not exporting a lot, but still our rupee was overvalued. So in one shot, I think they devalued the rupee by 19%. In 1991. So these were a set of reforms, okay? And I've just given you a flavor of the reforms. We can go into much more detail. No, probably we won't go into much more detail, but this is the flavor of the reforms in 1991.
So we've hit this epochal budget, and things have finally started opening up. What happens to the Indian economy over the next 2-3 years?
So 2-3 years is difficult. I mean, I don't think anything happened over the next 2-3 years, because many of these reforms
or maybe till the end of the Narasimha Rao government.
Or maybe we can jump to Chidambaram's budget. I think that happened in 96 or 97.
Yeah, so 96 is where Narasimha Rao government ends, and 96 to 98 is the United Front government.
Yeah, you have the United Front government, then there's a lot of political instability there. Vajpayee's 5-day government or 13-day government, and then, again coming back, etc. So if you look at that entire decade, for instance, it's a very quiet period actually. In economy-wise, once this tumultuous kind of upheaval happens in 1991, after that you've actually got a very quiet period. If you search for economic history in the 90s, you won't find much. Not a lot happens, which is probably a very good sign, by the way, which means things are just going on as they're supposed to go on. Government is by and large keeping off the private sector, and they're allowing to this thing. So if you look at just numbers, GDP growth rate throughout that period is roughly between 5 to 7, so it's not exceptional, but it's not bad. I mean, it's a definite jump from the Hindu rate of growth, right? So you see now about 5 to 7% decent growth. Inflation is not off the charts. It's very much under control. Forex reserves are slowly building up. The rupee is devalued but stays stable. Our exports are slowly picking up. The incomes the incomes are going up of people. There's a growing middle class. When we talk about the famed Indian middle class, it's in the 90s that it actually starts growing, right? It's actually becoming a sizable number to reckon with. And I think importantly, if you look at two important things that I want to say, one is that there's finally a birth of this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. Right. So before 91, we only had few really big ones, as we said, Tatas and Birlas and Bajaj and so on, who could basically survive the government's constant intervention and their torture. But now, when there's signs of freedom, you have a lot more entrepreneurs coming up and saying, okay, we can also thrive here. We can also establish business here and actually go about our daily lives without having that threat where the government will just come and take away your business overnight, right? The nationalization kind of thing. So you saw a birth of entrepreneurial spirit in 91. Beyond the 91 reforms. That is the first point. But second, it's a mixed bag. The 91 reforms are supposed to be a starting point, and just that. There's still a lot to be done. But no government wanted to touch it again after that. And that for me is a very surprising thing, because the good effects of 91 reforms had to reverberate. And I would imagine that governments would want to do more of what succeeded, what won them, what was good for the economy. But you didn't see a lot of that.
I think maybe it had something to do with the fact that in 96, Narasimha Rao couldn't win back power. So maybe they thought that, okay, maybe reforms aren't the electoral issue that we thought they would be.
In fact, that is a theme that we can come back to over and over and over again, because the next big set of reforms you saw was by Vajpayee in the 2000 years, and then 2004, he lost the elections. So, in fact, I don't know, the Indian, and this is an extremely depressing thought, and I'll need Joel to come up with something light after this. But I think the Indian polity does not reward economic reforms. I mean, and that seems to be some kind of overlapping theme or recurring theme, unfortunately. So, it just happens. So, that's
Chandrababu Naidu also lost his election in 2004, I think only that was. And just to give you guys context, considering a lot of you might have been infants at that time, But yeah, in the Vajpayee years, we were beginning to become to like the first green shoots, as they say, of our the service industry, the IT
IT was like, my
were
God.
were kicking off right at
Becoming
that
the
time.
superstars at that point in time.
Yeah, and I mean, you cannot imagine what IT was in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was like our salvation, so to speak. Like at least the way I perceived it, as I in the late 90s, I was like in my late teens. So that was the way it was perceived at that time. And Chandrababu Naidu, I remember, started off. He created this thing called Cyberabad, which was
Yeah.
an
So
extension of Hyderabad.
he was called the CEO of Andhra Pradesh, no?
Yeah, he
Because
was
that's
the
the
CEO called
terminology
the
they started
CEO.
using.
Yeah, he was the first guy to be called the CEO of Andhra Pradesh. And then in 2004, again, all these guys got voted out.
Yeah, that's I think the sad aspect of this, but that you I think you rightly captured the mood of the nation in the 2000, right? The turn of the millennium was a fantastic time to be alive in India, right? There was so much hope of an exceedingly bright future, and which I will say right at the outset that we've squandered. I mean, without blinking my eye, I will say we've squandered that kind of hope that existed in '99.
Yeah.
We can lay the blame at 1,000 people, probably at ourselves, but ultimately it is what it is.
Yeah.
But at that point, it was almost a magical time, right? There was a lot of things happening, right? We had actually seen good economic growth for a decade. I mean, not stellar, not the Chinese kind of numbers of 12-14%, but steady, nice 7-8%, like the middle class. It was just growing, it was steady. And then at the start of the millennium, as you rightly said, we saw an IT boom, right? And this IT boom was happening around the world. It also occurred in India, and there was, the Infosys and people, Infosys and so on were creating jobs. I mean, lots and lots of jobs, and that was something, truly, I think. A wonderful time. I mean, in multiple ways. I remember even the other big kind of achievement of Vajpayee government, which I'm just picking this, but other big achievement of the Vajpayee government, which I don't think he gets enough credit for, is the roads. I mean, just picking on one thing, right? He built this entire Golden Quadrilateral. He started this project of the Golden Quadrilateral, and even that some Gramin Sadak something. I can't spell it out. Which basically meant good roads in both villages, towns, and then of course the national highways, 6-lane highway. And I don't know if you guys remember, but the first time going on a 6-lane highway, it was something special, right? It's something that you're not used to seeing.
I remember going on that Mumbai-Pune expressway for the very first time I think that was like 2000 or 2001. Yeah. And you crossed Navi Mumbai and you hit the expressway, and this was, I mean, now the expressway is so normal and there's traffic jams and all sorts of things on it, but this was a time. Magic. First of all, it was so new you could eat off the road. It was so new. And it was, literally, like Tushar said, it was magic. It was like, where have we come? Like, this giant 6-lane highway. Yeah. And then even the Golden Quadrilateral, as it happened, like I remember when we were in Mumbai, and suddenly there were just flyovers popping up everywhere. And though credit is, the credit for those flyovers, there are 15 people who will fight over. But the fact is that they did happen. The Western Express Highway happened. And this is just in our city. I can't imagine in places like Delhi or in Bangalore and other places as well.
Yeah, and a whole bunch of things actually just occurred at that time, right? I mean, even just the that entrepreneurial spirit that I was talking about. For instance, the early 2000s is when you first saw, cafes, for instance. I mean, in Bangalore, Coffee Day was such a big thing. I mean, people are queuing outside to be part of, to go inside Coffee Day and have even though it was, overpriced for a lot of us, we were standing outside.
Also because they also had great marketing support in the form of friends.
Yeah.
And the internet happened, right? The internet was beginning to take off at that time, and there were cyber cafes everywhere. I remember I was doing like my first job at that time.
Also,
I was like
the start of the mobile revolution of sorts.
Yeah, people had phones. Some people had phones, but it was something that we could all say, I don't have one now.
By 2002, Reliance Mobile had come, and they had that 40 paise per minute thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then, because then everyone had to lower their tariffs.
Yeah.
And then it exploded.
Yeah.
I remember I think by 2004, we'd hit a point where we were doing like 5 to 10 million new subscribers a month or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, something crazy like that.
Reliance did this back in 2000 and again did that with Jio. I think a lot of people don't remember that, but yeah, it's important to remember. And so, okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. So one big push was, as I said, infrastructure in the Vajpayee years, and there was a real massive push. So there was roads, ports, highways, bridges, etc. But the other part of the infrastructure was exactly this. So they came out with this thing called New Telecom Policy. And part of this new telecom policy was that they they changed the way that the telecom operators from fixed license fees to another kind of, I don't know the specifics of it, but something which led to that massive growth in telecoms in the 2000s, right? Especially at that time. So you had Airtel and so on who were generally until then nowhere. They came to the fore. That again also, by the way, started because of privatization of VSNL.
BSNL, yeah.
VSNL
to Tatas.
Yeah. Okay, that was one aspect. And two, they separated BSNL from the telecom department. So they said, okay, regulation should be different from service providers. Okay, so they and that, by the way, by itself has huge I think repercussions, because if you have a regulator and the player who are the same, then obviously no one will want to be as part of that game, right? It's so that's the thing.
You can't be the umpire and the player at the same time.
Yeah. Exactly. You don't want to be. Yeah, you don't want to be playing where Steve
unless
Smith
it's gully cricket, because then you have no other option.
Exactly. But so those are the really important kind of reforms that took place. So as I said, after 91, the next set of reforms we saw was in the 2000s, early 2000s, and so that entire thing about India shining, etc. So there was quite a bit of substance behind it. So there's an infra push, and then the entire there was divestment of VSNL. There was this thing of BSNL. Telecom companies came into being, etc. Right. So I think all of those things are really good. The other really important bit, I don't know. This is where we get back to the boring stuff, but this is about government finances, and two phenomenal things happened. So after 91, again, this was the second time when there was a big push for privatization and disinvestment, especially. So there was a big push towards disinvestment and privatization. You had, Bharat Aluminium Company, something called Hindustan Zinc, Indian Petrochemicals Corporation Limited, and there's a whole bunch of these kind of companies.
Centaur Hotels.
Yeah. So I can't believe you remembered that. I had just completely
it's a Bombay thing. All the Bombay people remember. There was a big controversy around it, no?
Oh, is it? Okay. I have no clue. It's just so that kind of privatization happened. So that helped in consolidation of the government budgets. So from the runaway kind of expenditure, you said, okay, now that's one way to make revenue, and then we can see. But the second really amazing thing, and I would have never expected this from an Indian government, is that we passed something called the FRBMA. Right? Now, that might seem like a purely boring technical stuff, but let me put it this way. This is the first time where the government said we will impose limits on ourselves as to how much we can spend. Right? And so it's amazing for its own reasons, right? The government would never willingly accept limits on how much it spends, forget imposing it on itself, right? So FRBMA is the Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act. This was passed in 2003. Again, who was Yashwant Sinha was the finance minister, if I'm not mistaken. So they said, okay, we've got to start controlling how much the government spends. Of course, it's another story that it doesn't really come into effect until 2010 or so, but fine, we've at least enacted a legislation, right? So this is the highlights of the Vajpayee era, if you please. And
then promptly got voted out of power.
So that's something I think a lot of people didn't expect. Genuinely didn't expect.
It was a surprise I think it was a surprise for the Congress also.
Yeah. Oh, really? We won? Oh, okay, fine. Okay. So that was, the entire India shining thing failed. Of course, the narrative, at least, and we don't know how much to believe. The story is that there was too much emphasis on urban India and not enough on rural India, etc. That cities were given the push instead of
Also, I think India suffered a bunch of droughts during that period.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
There were huge
droughts
problems in the rural area.
Exactly. There were droughts, and there was also,
And also the sanctions post the nuclear test.
Yeah. So the whole bunch of things, I think, this thing. So, in any case, there was a change of power, and then came, UPA 1 under Manmohan Singh, a little bit of drama there, which we will not get into. But yeah, you had Manmohan Singh's, and so, strangely, and I think, this is a very interesting thing. If you had to look at UPA 1 and UPA 2, if you just look at the composition and how they came into power, you would expect a lot of work to be done on UPA 2 and almost nothing under UPA 1. Yeah. But in reality, it was exactly the opposite. Yeah. A lot actually got done under UPA 1. Almost nothing got done under UPA 2 except a whole bunch of corruption scams and scandals. But that's the story there, right? So UPA 1, you had Congress, which didn't have an absolute majority, so they had to tie up with the left. And that was a massive restrictive factor. So a lot of the moves towards privatization were blocked even before they formed government. It was off the agenda. Some of the reforms like labor laws, etc., were off the agenda. It wouldn't even come. You couldn't even mention it. But I think so. You didn't see any big bang reform in UPA 1, right? But overall, there was a very healthy kind of pro-business attitude from the Congress, right? And so, of course, let me also state, right up front that period, UPA 1, either because of the government or despite the government, doesn't matter, was the best years of economic growth for India.
Right? Also, there was the MNERGA was passed, I think, during UPA 1. So there was a boost in rural spending.
But that's not a reform, right? I wouldn't see that as a reform at all.
Right.
It's a big government scheme, and there were quite a lot of government schemes. And again, that is prompted by the left kind of thing, right? So you're looking at employment guarantee schemes, and there was a whole bunch of other things which more welfare-oriented schemes. Now, yes, there was a lot of schemes. Some of them genuinely, I think, merited. Some of them absolutely not. But yeah, that was the thing.
So, like you were saying, the UPA government were the best years of growth, right? We were hitting double digits at that time, if I'm not mistaken.
No, not quite double digits, but we had about three years of 9% growth continuously, and then 1 year later on again of about 8 to 9% of growth. And again, I think that set expectations for a lot of people, saying 9% is a new normal, etc. But those are extraordinary years. So before we kind of jump ahead all the way, again, a little bit of context setting in 2004 is important. 2004 was an exceptional period in world history, not just India. Not 2004 particularly, but I mean that period between 2003 and 2007. That period actually coincided with, that India's highest growth period also coincided with the world's highest growth period. And that's a very important correlation, because when the world is growing, it's easier for you to grow, right? You export more, there's higher trade, there's better, even labor mobility, for instance, there's more technology transfer, there's better things being invented everywhere, you get benefits of that, etc. So 2003 to 2007 was an exceptional period. There was another really key aspect which fueled all of this. And for that, to understand that, fortunately or unfortunately, I think we will have to get into US history, if you will allow me, very briefly. And this is, in 2000, you had the dot-com bubble, right? And the bursting of the dot-com bubble in the 2000s. And so there was a small recession that happened, very small actually. And in 2003, to kind of come out of that recession, the US Federal Reserve, which is a central bank, adopted an extremely easy monetary policy stance. What that means in the simplest terms is that they reduced the interest rate to 1%. Anyone who wanted to borrow had to pay 1% interest, which is nothing at all. So people borrowed immensely in the US. Right, from the Federal Reserve, from the banks. I mean, banks would borrow from the Federal Reserve, and people would borrow from banks, all at that peanut kind of interest rate. And so, a lot of people invested in the US, but there's only so much you can invest in the US, right? Yeah. And the rest of the money actually came out to emerging markets. And India was that shining kind of country at that point of time. You had China, of course, which was growing phenomenally well, but they were close to foreign investment. So your next best bet was India. And we got, and remember I said I'll come back to this when we're talking about FDI policy, right? So the fact that we had liberalized FDI and FII really helped us now, because we just got a whole lot of investment. So every single big brand that you can think of now had, major kind of investments done in that period between 2003, because they would borrow in the US and they would just come here and invest in India. Because in the US, you could borrow at 1% and the rate of return in India was something like 7 to 8%. So, it was a no-brainer for a lot of investors, right? So there was investment in Indian companies, there was investment by foreign companies into their own companies, there was investment in the stock market, there was investment in the bond market. India was the kind of destination for foreign investment at that period. And all of that thanks to the 1% interest rate in the US. That actually helped us to achieve that 9% growth. And that, I think, is a very important kind of player in all of this. Our best years were helped by something that happened in the US, right? And the other really important thing in all of this is that, as I said, while there was no really big bang kind of reforms, there were always, there's after 91, all kinds of reforms were, incremental reforms, right? And that kind of incremental reforms kept happening. But importantly, I don't think the Manmohan Singh government in any way prevented or disrupted businesses, and I think that's a very key issue. They didn't do anything outrageously stupid, and that is itself a big achievement for an Indian government. I'm probably cruel.
I wonder who you're talking about now.
And so
I think we'll come to that soon enough.
We'll come to that. Yeah. But so it was just that was all that was required, right? You let the companies do whatever they wanted, and not whatever they wanted, as in go carry out legitimate legal business activity, and you will see the returns of that. And I think India saw that quite well in that UPA 1 period.
And then came 2008.
Yeah, and then came 2008. This period also saw, if you want different kinds of indicators, right, of how well the economy was doing, you have to look at, for instance, the Sensex, which was at just about 2,000 points, actually 1,900 points at the time of liberalization in 1991, reached 20,000 in 2007. Right? And so that is, actual, 10x jump in a matter of 15, 16 years or so, which is phenomenal. It's at 40,000 now, of course. The second big kind of landmark which we reached in 2020 is at 40,000 now. But that jump was phenomenal for all kinds of things, right? So that also showed the kind of confidence that investors and companies had in the kind of the India growth story, as people say, right? Another indicator was this... or rather, the good kind of policy decision taken was the birth of the SEZ. So there was an actual policy taken by Manmohan Singh government called the Special Economic Zones Act of 2005, I think. So that actually said, okay, we know that, as a general rule, doing business in India is onerous and burdensome and troublesome, etc. So we're going to carve out this thing. And this is just directly borrowing from China, right? This worked wonderfully well in China. So they said, we'll do the same thing here. So the SEZ concept kind of came about in that period, 2005. I know I'm probably sounding like I'm just putting random kind of disjointed events, but, it all adds up to this growth story that I'm saying. Right?
No, if you're thinking of to put a little bit of context to what an SEZ is, it's basically a special economic zone. And if you are close to most large cities in India, we have a bunch of them, that you're probably familiar with. Like if you are in Mumbai, then there is a lot in Navi Mumbai. There are SEZs. There's one in the middle of Andheri. The Santa Cruz one, yeah.
Yeah. So but that is really helpful because, as I said, otherwise regulations are even after the liberalization, it's still onerous. And so you're carving out the special place saying, okay, none of those rules will apply here. Right?
Yeah.
None of those rules and the reason why we do the SEZ is, reforming it outside is extremely difficult, politically speaking. So we carve out this place saying, okay, outside of that SEZ, all of the rules apply, but inside it won't. And so that is the way they do it, right? Just again, so, one or two more points about indicators. We spoke about the software boom that existed until now, right? So India was the shining example. You had also BPOs here, outsourcing had taken off at this point of time. So not just that we were exporting software, but in a way we are exporting labor now, right?
Yeah.
As in we are doing the work of somewhere else, that entire outsourcing thing that was happening, etc. All of this meant that our exports were doing really well for a change. In India's history, we've almost never had a current account surplus. That is basically that we have exported more than we've imported. That almost never happens because we import so much of oil, and as I said, we don't really export things that people want. But for the first time, two things work. One, remittances, right? So a lot of again, when people are doing well, they are going out to study. That turns into jobs. Then that means they're sending money back home, and so our forex reserves are doing really well. We're getting a lot of money from outside to our software. For the first time, we're actually producing something that the world wants.
Yeah.
Right? And in a big scale. And so this meant that in the year 2006, if I'm not mistaken, or could be 2007 or in between, for the first time in a very, very long time, and organically, we had a current account surplus. Right? We earned more by exports than what we had paid for importing, which is phenomenal, right?
59 years after independence, we managed to do it.
Yeah, and so the rupee, from about when it was just about touching 50 to the dollar back then, actually started reversing its trend and touched 39 to the dollar, right?
Yes,
and again, that was big news, and that in fact that hurt exports a little bit, but still that was a kind of a big deal back then. But I'll talk about just one final thing, and I'm really sorry, but this again to tell you the story of India and its growth. This was the time when, if you remember reading stories from then, this was the time when Indian companies started making multi-billion-dollar acquisitions outside of India.
Yeah.
Right? So you had Tata Steel, which was much, much smaller, going out and buying Chorus, right, which was a UK-based steel company. You had, and that I think was $13.1 billion. This was in 2007. Aditya Birla Group's, I think Hindalco went ahead and bought, a $6 billion deal of Novelis of the US, right, in 2007 again. Tata Motors bought Jaguar. Right, that's a big story.
Land Rover,
the
Jaguar Land Rover. Tata bought Tetley. There was these big, and I was at CNBC at this time. I was working at CNBC during this time, and there was a sense of euphoria. I am not kidding. Like I was at CNBC between 2004 and 2007. Of course, I was not doing anything business related. I was in the auto space. But I remember every time these things were happening, like the Chorus thing was happening, the JLR thing was happening. Every time there was a foreign investment, there was a Indian company, it was like, is this the reversal of the East India Company?
It was such a huge narrative also, right? The fact that we're competing on the world stage finally.
Yeah.
Like exactly. I remember Mahindra I think acquired Pininfarina. Pininfarina, that the design company that was designing cars for Ferrari and things like that at that time. And I remember everyone was walking on air.
And that was the mood of the world, right? And it was rubbing off on India. There was that sense of euphoria everywhere in the US, in Europe, and of course in India. And of course, India was shining amongst all the emerging economies, right? China was growing faster, but India democratic processes, etc., but also managed to grow at 9%. So there was this, just like you see in a movie, right? The best scenes happen, and then something wrong is going to happen, and that's what did, right? In 2007. By the way, we didn't feel the effects. If you see, 2007, the crisis was already well set almost in the US. We didn't have a spectacular crash, etc., but the prices were going down. All of those things started, right? Of course, let's say 2008, Lehman Brothers, etc., crashed, but there was very good indicators. But we didn't see that until much later on, by the way. And even that, if you read the stories from that time, people said that India had completely managed to escape the global crisis. We didn't. We just managed to push it later, and I'll come to that later, right? So 2007, the kind of crisis starts brewing in the US. 2008, it's much deeper. What immediately affects us is that we see stoppage of FDI and FI, right? Foreign investments come down massively. Our exports again are now no more the shining as it was in 2006. All of this happens. We are remember 2000, and somehow we still scrape through. I mean, we're not growing at that 9%. GDP growth is about 4% or so. But that, in a world where everyone else is, having negative growth, -2, -3, -4, if we are, positive 4, it still seems like we've done spectacularly well, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, to be fair, we were not immediately affected, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is this entire theory called decoupling theory, right? Now, about 40% back then, I think about 40% of China's GDP came from trade. Yeah. And so therefore, if you had a spectacular collapse of international trade, like the 2008 crisis was, China would be affected. But India, I think our trade to GDP ratio is something like 9 to 10%. So yes, we were affected by that much, but only that much, right? Initially, and that is key here, initially.
Also, Anupam, if I'm not mistaken, we did not focus. I mean, we paid attention to our domestic market as well at that time, right? Unlike China, which was completely focused on exports. Yeah. Did that also make a difference?
Absolutely. That's part of that decoupling. I mean, China said that we'll make most of our money by exporting to the rest of the world. We said we'll sell to ourselves. I mean, in a large way, right? I mean, we're a big economy with a big market, etc. So, we wouldn't at least put artificial restrictions on selling domestically, whereas China did that. So, that you have those differences. And therefore, that helped us tide over some of these things, right?
And from what I've also, I was reading this excerpt from this book by Pooja Mehra called The Lost Decade.
Yeah.
Where she essentially said the Indian government initially at least just opened the tap, sort of, the expenditure tap, which sort of helped tide over, at least initially.
Yes, and that's exactly what I was coming to. This is all leading up to 2009, and 2009 is an election year, right? And you know that all sorts of economics goes out of the window when it's an election year. So Manmohan Singh, the economist, is absolutely not to be seen, and you have the entire party politics and electoral machinery taking over, and all sense of economics goes thrown out of the window. Right? 3 big things happen in 2009, which is you have the farm loan waiver.
Yeah.
Nationwide farm loan waiver. You have the acceptance of the 7th Pay Commission. And you finally have the MNREGA scheme going nationwide again. So NREGA was, initially, of course, in 2005, but it was only in 60 districts. It was supposed to be a trial run. And we're supposed to get the results of that trial run. I mean, of course, 2005, it didn't start immediately. It was only started about 2007 it's this thing. And we had to do a trial run to see whether it works, whether we achieve the goals, etc. And it was supposed to be, much later on that we decide whether to continue with it or not. Overnight, Rahul Gandhi, as in a speech in one of those spectacular kind of dramatic moments, he says, we're going to just expand MRJ throughout. And so it happens. So from, overnight, it's in 600 districts, and which means, expenditure goes up massively, right? So these 3 things put together shoots up the fiscal deficit of the government. Just to give you context, the FRBMA that I spoke about, that is the government doing this act to limit its own spending, said that the fiscal deficit should not be more than 3% of GDP, right? That is, you should not spend more than that. In this election year, 2009, our fiscal deficit was 6.5% of GDP for the union government itself. Right? So it just spent its way. So, and that means that in that year, 2009-10, our GDP growth rate was back to 8.5% or so on, right? Because obviously you spend that much, you're going to get immediate results.
Yeah.
Everyone is impressed. You kind of, this narrative goes around that we've saved from from the entire global crisis. Manmohan Singh gets voted back to power and then starts UPA 2. A disastrous kind of run for that government.
But again, nothing major as far as reform was concerned in UPA 2. And that was the problem, right? That it was supposed to be like, the narrative at that time was this policy paralysis and like, they're growing, but are we?
Pranab Mukherjee.
Yeah.
Also, Pranab Mukherjee was a finance minister and he was doing retroactive taxing. I believe that was when it started, right?
A little bit 70s wala feel was coming from him.
Exactly. And so again, the context here is that, unlike in 2004, in 2009, Congress has gotten a clear majority. By the way, that you also see that I think the single biggest, spike in Sensex in its history. So, markets are overjoyed that, finally the Congress is no longer encumbered by the left and they're free to do. And now we're going to see, and Manmohan Singh, again, the economist, right, who bought in this 1991 reforms, we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to grow, and there's a lot of hope again. And it just completely disappears. I mean, all that hope is gone. You've got corruption scandals, one after the other. The 2G scam, I don't even remember now, right? The
coal scam, 2G
scam,
yeah, railway
scam, the Olympics. No, not the Olympics. Asian
Commonwealth Games.
Whole bunch of things, right? It just every other day you open the newspaper, there's some other scandal or a scam, and that kind of captures that 5 years. Initially, at least, right? Now, we're talking about 2009, 10, 11. This is what happens. Nothing really big happens in terms of policy. You're only seeing these kind of scandals and scams. What happens after that, right? 2012-13, I think, is the beginning of the disaster. Now, in macroeconomics, right, and I don't want to get the deep into this thing, but I have this particular thing that, whenever you do something like the thing that we did in 2009, there's almost a karma attached to it. Okay, excuse my language,
Coming
but
back,
bringing in these things, but there is a karma attached to it, as in you can't get away from it. So if you try to do, it's like the three things that they did was that artificial boost was like taking a dose of steroid, right? Now, you might see that downfall of the steroid, for a human being, you will see that right away. Once the drug retreats from the body, you will see that right away. But for the economy, it takes 2 to 3 years. And that was exactly that, right? You can think of steroid or ecstasy or whatever other drug. First, disclaimer, I have not tasted or experienced any of these things. It's purely academic knowledge. Okay, so... but it's exactly that. It's like the high is there in 2009, and that lasts for 2-3 years. But then
then comes the crash.
Yeah, it starts retreating, and then you have a massive crash. And that's
do you think it would not have happened had maybe the scams not happened and they wouldn't have had policy paralysis? Do you think they would have still gotten away with it?
I think the economic crash would have happened nonetheless. That was inevitable. But I think that economic crash plus the scams all put together
made it much worse.
Started really showing up, because you're now saying that, okay, first we have terrible economic growth, and that was when, by the way, I think in 2013 we came down to 4% or 3 something% GDP growth, right? From the heady days of 9%, now you're talking about half the GDP growth rate. So for the better or worse, they themselves set the benchmark against which they were compared, right?
Yeah.
So so you have this massive fall in GDP growth. By the way, all of this, there's another really big theme which I'll probably keep for later. Just remind me, which is on jobs and employment generation. But that's not doing very well. So, you've got people who are dissatisfied, and then again comes these scams, right? And comes, this massive siphoning of money from the public exchequer. And people are mad, obviously, right? And at this point of time, again, there's this, the karma of 2009 coming back to bite you in 2012-13. Inflation now is at 14% or 16%, I think it reaches, which is phenomenally high. You've got, matching, you've got interest rates going up because, otherwise it's, there's negative real returns, right? So interest rate goes up. Rupee is falling. The rupee touches 70 to the dollar for the first time in 2013. And as, there was this big kind of coordination in the global and Indian economy in 2003 to 2007, you similarly have that same thing happening in 2012-13, right? Which is that US has now come out of the recession and is no longer having that. Until now, they had 0% interest rate. Right? 0% interest rate plus this thing called quantitative easing. Now, that is complete macroeconomic voodoo, so we won't get into that at all. But basically, it meant that the US government was throwing money. In the simplest sense, they were just wildly throwing money, and therefore still you had investors who would take those money and then come to India, which is good because, You're borrowing at 0%, and even if India gives you 2%, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Now the US started raising its interest rate. So now it's no longer worth to take that money and invest in India. In fact, people had already invested in India. Remember, as I said, inflation is 14%. So if you get any return below 14%, you're at a loss. So investors start taking the money and going back to the US. Right? And this is called the taper tantrum. Okay. Now, because of all of this, you have a situation where rupee falls to 70%, our forex reserve starts going down. Inflation is at 16%. People are really worried. So what people start doing is just buying gold. Whenever you have a very extremely high inflation, people just buy gold, right? Because you get better returns. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
If inflation is at 14% and your bank gives you even 6% interest rate, you're making a 10% loss. Every minute you keep it at the bank, you're making a loss. So why would you do that? Instead, you go buy gold. And that's what people did, right? And so once you buy gold, it means again your currency is going down. So the government had to step in. Raghuram Rajan at that time actually put curbs on how much gold you could import. All of these things, right? It's complete shambles. Investment rate drops massively by 5 to 6 percentage points. Savings rate goes down because people don't want to save in a bank. All of these things, right? And your economy is at doldrums. So that's the kind of scenario we find ourselves in 2013, 2014.
The setup for the Modi government.
Yes, the setup for the Modi wave, who of course promises development, and people, are fed up with what they've seen in the last 2-3 years. And remember, this is a narrative, right? Day in and day out, you're seeing negative news about the current government.
Yeah.
Day in and day out, you're seeing wonderful, positive coverage of this new person who promises the heaven, earth, and everything else in between, right?
And I would just like to take a moment that one of their biggest slogan was, the government has no business being in business.
Yes, let's remind ourselves of all of this. I think he'll come back. He'll keep coming back when we speak about the next 5-6 years. But minimum government, maximum governance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a big one.
Remember that?
Yeah, I remember the excitement of so many libertarians.
Oh yeah,
who were just like, oh my God, finally, it's going to happen now.
Yeah, the irony is I think is not lost on any one of us. But so that's, I think, the setup for, of course, this Modi wave. We know that that story of development, I think, won way before Modi won the elections. I think it was a foregone conclusion. It was just it was an academic exercise. The election was, according to me, an academic exercise. Pretty much everyone knew the results. Right? There was no shock like the Vajpayee transition, etc. And now comes the Modi eras of 2014 up till today, and I don't know for how long, until Adityanath becomes the next prime minister, I think. But
I think so far as there's a lot we can talk about. We don't have the benefit of hindsight as much with, say, the Modi government. I mean, we do, obviously, but not as much as, say, Manmohan Singh's mistakes or Vajpayee's mistakes or whatever. But I think two things that I want to talk about definitely before we close this is the two economic policies that the Modi government has done. One was the demonetization, and the other, of course, was GST. And the difference, at least the way I see it, in the two cannot be more stark. In the one hand, you have something like the GST. Okay, this is something that needed to be done. Everyone is in agreement. We passed the act. There is a unilateral consensus that this needs to happen. It goes all awry in the the rules and regulations, but chalo, that is fixable. But demonetization, Anupam, what was, reams have been written about
To add context to demonetization, I think it's important to know where we were economically just before it hit. Because from whatever I gather, we were finally starting to sort of come out of the mess a little bit. Or is that true, or is it?
Absolutely, yes. We were coming out of the mess. And in fact, so I will try to be impartial about all of this. And I will say that the Modi government in 2014 started really well, by the way. They started really well. They had quite nice, whatever ambitions, whatever that means, in terms of what they wanted to achieve. So they, the 100 smart cities, for example, was something that we desperately required. I mean, forget the smart, right? That's just a tagline. But we needed 100 new cities. We still need 100 new cities even today, if you ask me. Right? Cities are the engines of growth. Cities are the ways of job creation. So you need cities, right? So that was, again, not a bad thing at all. In fact, they also did, the IBC, that is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which is a wonderful thing. So they were, I think, and then they finally said, okay, forget the Planning Commission. Right? They disbanded the Planning Commission, which is nothing but, the relic of our socialist past. I see no business of the Planning Commission in today's modern economy. You can't plan for 5 years. I mean, if anything, the last 1 year, if anything, it taught us is you can't plan for 5 years, right? Exactly. So, things like that were really good, positive moves done in 2014. Our GDP growth rate was back at the 6% level. 2015, I think it was slightly higher. I think it was at 7.5%. And I think there was a genuine feeling that we are back on this path, right? Of course, there's things happening in the social world, in the political realm, which, for the interest of, maintaining focus on this, we should not really get into. But it just purely on the economic front, I think they started really well, 2014, 2015. There was a lot of real positive kind of reforms that were undertaken, some of them really big. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is massive. And it's something that we needed, and so, that is something that we should keep in mind. There was, again, a little bit of a push on infrastructure. Just number of roads, the number of kilometers of roads built every day was, again, it was really impressive, the kind of strides we got there. Rural roads were built. All of this is the positive, right? And then, of course, just undoing all of that is 2016. November 8th, 2016, right? It's a scary, scary, scary day for multiple reasons. I think it's one of those, again, once in a lifetime epochal thing, like how people in the US probably remember, where were you and what were you doing during 9/11? I think in India, we remember I very clearly remember which bar I was in.
Same. Absolutely.
And then how much I had to drink to forget what had happened after that.
Anupam, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a hoax. I was like, nay, this is just WhatsApp and all, because 2016 was not that long ago. We all had WhatsApp groups and so on and so forth. And I was just like, nay, yaar, this is beyond the realms of madness. This is not possible only. This is a hoax. And
I remember, I was like, this is insane. But I also was like, he just won the next election. Because of the way we perceive these strongman actions. Yeah. My reaction was, he's won the next election.
Yeah, and there was the I think UP elections right around the corner.
Right after that, and so, the big theory is that he did it for that.
Yeah, well,
because he lost Bihar and there was some stuff happening. So it was the claim. Of course, we will never know.
We will never know, and I think it's probably useless to try and speculate about the intentions from non-mortals, right? Immortals. So
my biggest takeaway from that entire period, when I was actually stunned by the capacity of the executive, because I don't think anyone had ever said you can't do this. You know what I'm saying? Like for a PM to do something this huge, right? It's like one of those Trump situations, where we like, can we stop him from doing this? And they'll be like, no one ever thought anyone would do this. So there are no rules. The rules don't exist.
And for me, it was like, it reminded me of my childhood, the childhood of lines. The Sarkari office, the Sarkari bank, the lines.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, how are we back here again in 2016?
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of things that we can speak on this for hours together. But I just want to, one, I think massive failure, even in the thought process, right? Modi, as we know, doesn't listen to his economic advisors. He has an economic advisory team, which is, and has got good people in it, by the way, but he doesn't listen to any of them. right? And has never listened to any of them. This particular idea came from a fringe group. Like, you have that Swadeshi Jagran Manch.
Yeah, that CA guy, I think.
Yeah, and there's some guy called Anil, whatever, B something. And so this guy goes and pitches it to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister agrees, even though you've got Urjit Patel and co. initially saying no. Raghuram Rajan said absolutely no. All the trained economists are saying, please do not do something like this. Whoever is in the know, I mean, later it comes out that the finance minister didn't really know about it at all. And so, but whoever did know about it, I think, and who had some amount of knowledge in economics, strongly cautioned against it, saying that this move would be disastrous. And I think anyone at that point of time with iota of common sense could see that this was going to be a failure, right?
Yeah.
No one could predict, by the way, the extent of the failure, by the way. Even the harshest critics in 2016, and I was one of them, and I wrote a piece the very next day, by the way, on November 9th, I think, and I'll take credit for this, okay? Mine was the first op-ed to come out on this particular topic. Okay? And even I was kind of harsh saying this is the reasons why this wouldn't work. These are possibly the bad consequence of it. And now I look back and say, what an idiot I was. I was not... I don't think I was harsh enough, and I couldn't predict the amount of damage it would do to the economy, to be fair, to the extent of the damage, right? Overnight, you killed the informal economy. Overnight, you reduced the labor force by a grand, 40, 60 million people were out of the labor force. Overnight, by the way. A lot of people lost jobs. We know all of this, right? Incomes were lost, long lines, productivity was down. I mean, that kind of indicators, I think everyone knew. And I will say this without a single kind of minute or second of hesitation that this was a mess that could have been predicted. This was something that was completely unnecessary and entirely unjustifiable. I mean, there is no justification for this. Even the hardest fan, and I don't want to use the word Bhakt here, but even the biggest fan of Modi with a clear conscience cannot, using evidence, by the way, cannot justify this move. Because if you take, and they were shifting goalposts, right? Every other day, the goalposts were shifted. Once it was to combat black money, the other day it was to counter terrorism, the other day it was to counter fake currency, the other day it was something else, corruption. Then it was suddenly we said, no, all of this was done.
Militants in Kashmir, Naxals.
Oh, and apparently, let's not forget, 3 lakh crore rupees was supposed to not come back.
There was that what was it called, the windfall they were calling it.
The windfall. And then there was, of course, the entire thing about pushing digital transactions and stopping cash usage, all of these things. And income tax, increase in tax ratio. Every other day you would find some other kind of goalpost, but and I did this exercise. If you want, I'll share it later. But I actually counted all the goalposts, and right next to it we say, you kind of see what was achieved. Not a single one of them, right? Cash was back in circulation. Now it's exactly back. By the way, to the in terms of percentage of GDP, it's completely back. Amount of digital transactions, of course, has gone up, but I would say that would have gone up in any case, right? Because cash is back to normal in terms of.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt you here. So the other day they were celebrating the anniversary of demonetization, by the way.
Yeah, literally.
So they show this. They show this graph of UPI transactions. Like, okay, 2016 mein bahut kam, 2017 mein bahut kam, and 18 and 19 they're like 1000% high. I'm like, wait, you do realize this is a year after demonetization, and also you're avoiding the biggest thing in the middle of all this. Jio launched in 16-17. So now you have broadband connections. Your broadband connections are 4 or 5 times the broadband connections you had in 2016.
But Tushar, you're adding nuance to something over there. Yeah? What are you?
Sorry.
What are you doing, man?
What are you doing, guy? It's nonsense.
I will be an uncle and sit down.
We don't add nuance to these conversations.
That is my mistake. Buddy.
The greatest master stroke ever. Okay, please, that's the line and stick to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
one day this is one of my deep. Obviously, it's never going to happen. But like a Frost Nixon type situation, or
what were you thinking?
What were you thinking, guys? Like, what was happening over there? Like, the Iran-Contra affair, or, these events that were shrouded in secrecy and then exploded. You're like, okay, what was the thought process behind this? And one of the things I want to find out is or I'd like to know is this, like, in the days leading up to the demonetization, like, what were the thoughts? What were the, like, I'm sure they were so concerned about the secrecy part of it. I don't think anyone bothered to figure out what is going to happen when we literally throw a grenade in the room and run away.
Yeah. And no, that was one thing. Yeah. And one thing that absolutely annoys me is when people say, no, the move had good intentions, but it was implemented bad. I yell at anyone who says that, because, you can't, all policy is to do with the idea plus the implementation. If you say the idea was good, implementation was bad, then that's not a good policy. It is a terrible policy, right?
That means nothing, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you can take any parallel and immediately figure out that it's a stupid excuse. And don't tell me you couldn't figure this out. We've had 60 years in India which is rife with corruption, etc. And now you're suddenly surprised that a few bank clerks are corrupt because they're exchanging old notes for new ones? Are you really surprised by that?
Also, you have the experience. You've done this once before and it's failed in the 70s.
It's failed.
And on a much smaller portion of the currency.
Yeah, but forget currency, Tushar. I mean, even if that seems like a vague episode before, I mean, think about NREGA that happens, right? Half the money is taken over by whatever, the village panchayat guy. Yeah. Are you surprised?
Yeah.
So it's just ridiculous that someone was actually surprised that there were corrupt people in between who exchanged the notes. I mean, what were you thinking? Right? And so on and so forth. But anyway, I think the big kind of takeaway is that the complete kind of trust in the Indian economy has still not come back. Yeah. There are effects on the Indian economy. I mean, you immediately saw GDP crashing and so on. And that was the first order effect. But according to me, on a move like this, there are second order, third order, fourth order, fifth order, and sixth order effects. I mean, one of the things that you could say that is happening now because of what happened because of demonetization is the lack of women in our labor force. Right? Yes. It was after demonetization that there was a massive fall in female labor force and labor force participation rate. And you're seeing that effect until now. And by the way, Pakistan and Bangladesh have a slightly higher labor force participation rate of women than India. Yeah. Just let that sink in, right? Yeah. And if this is not a disaster by the government, and of course, the demonetization accelerated it, it was bad, etc. But anything that accelerates something as, socially evil as this, I think cannot be forgiven. Right? And there's multiple things. As I said, yeah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, we've gone through, from last week and this week, we've gone through a series of events, then the internal, like one thing that we've been doing here is we keep providing context. Like, for instance, when we said, why did Nehru go for the planning way, or why did Nehru go for the command and control? We were like, Cold War. We had just come out of colonialism, so on and so forth. Why did Indira Gandhi? And you said, it was a political move, stability, whatever. Why did liberalization? There was the Gulf War. There was a bunch of things. But this is one thing, right?
It defies reason. It defies reason.
There's no reason over here. There's no there's nothing we can say about this. What is the context? Nothing.
Yeah. You can't even find internal consistency or logic from that side. I mean, forget about looking at it from our side. Try and look at it from a BJP politician's angle, and you still will not find logic. And that's what, is mind-blowing. Like, again, nationalization of banks, you could understand it from Indira's perspective. I would say it's completely wrong. It's one of the biggest blunders we've made in the first, 50 years of our independence. But it
follows the plan, that nationalization of industry, and nationalization is the socialist or the communist toolkit. It's there. It's in the toolbox. You know what I'm saying? This nationalized public sector companies and so on. Private.
I would just like to say we dodged another bullet, because I remember the same group which suggested this also had this grand idea of something called of abolishing income tax and having something called transaction tax.
Yeah.
And people are like, this is next. This is coming in like 6 months now.
Yeah, that will be scary. But anyway, I think we should move on pretty much, I think all of your listeners at least will be very aware of the
basically demonetization sucked and it ruined a lot of things.
Yes. Okay. So, but we'll move on so that we can get to probably other things that everyone doesn't know as clearly as this. Right. And demonetization was a turning point for the BJP as well. Once the economy crashed, I think they actually expected an uptick quite immediately, right? So you have a supply shock, and once that becomes normal, you have the economy growing back at an even faster pace than before. And I think that's what they expected with demonetization, but that never happened, right? So once we fell down from that 7.5% growth, we again were stuck at that very middling 4 to 5% growth, right? And it's gotten worse since then. Forget the pandemic. I mean, even before that, we were in a complete economic rut, right? And if you notice, this is a turning point for the BJP, right? And we can, very briefly talk about GST. Probably I'll just finish the GST section. I don't want to get too much into detail because it's a tax reform. GST was something that was absolutely required. But again, the implementation was botched. Now, one could say that it is a difficult political move because you've got to get, 29 states to agree. So it is difficult, no doubt. But I will just have one counter argument against that, which is that the kind of political will that Modi had to pull off something like demonetization and still have the goodwill of a lot of people, which for me is just completely bonkers. You could have used that political will for a good, effective, and simple GST. One tax rate or two tax rates, low tax rate, increase the base, etc. Right? And Modi at that point of time, 2016, 2017, when the GST came out, was a person who could have done anything under the sun and gotten away with it. Let's remember, that political context is very important. Right? So instead of wasting all of the political will on demonetization, I can think of 2 or 3 other things that could have been done, which could have radically put India on a different kind of trajectory of economic growth. One is GST by itself. The other one was labor laws. Why not reform labor laws? Why not reform land laws? Right? The kind of political will that was spent on demonetization could have been used for something like this, and it could have changed India's growth story. But, no point regretting any of that now, and we can't change that.
Plus, I think it's the only reform, it's the only economic, I said reform by mistake, but the economic policy that has literally given people PTSD. One major, because if you notice, right, during this entire Corona period or even before, the Prime Minister would be like, I'm addressing the nation line, and everyone was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? What's he going to do next?
It's a shock. And a torturous thing in our collective psyche, right? It exists and haunts us all in some way or the other. But moving on, right? So that's about GST. I don't want to say more. You could have had a simple tax rate, but we didn't. We ended up with this mess where, classifications, different products are classified on different things, suddenly, and it's a group of people who suddenly decide something is a luxury item, something is a non-luxury item, something is an essential item, etc. So, there's lobbying. Everyone tries and lobby saying, oh, can you put us in the essential item list so the tax rates are down? I'll give you one thing, right, which I always find. I hate the idea of anyone else deciding what a luxury item is and what an essential item is. That classification for me is absurd because, again, as I said, GST, a soap or a deodorant is classified at 28% GST, and 28% GST is reserved for luxury items, right?
Correct,
anyone who thinks a deodorant is a luxury should travel in Mumbai local trains. It's all I will say.
Exactly.
The very fact that you exist without the use for deodorant implies that you are living a super luxurious lifestyle.
Yeah, probably. Right?
That you have
everywhere, you don't have to go out.
Exactly. So then you don't need deodorant, and which is why there's no.
But or maybe they're all just talcum powder users.
I don't know.
Which is a big possibility. Anupam, but one thing I do want to ask you, that considering we are pretty much in this journey we've taken so far, we're pretty much at our present day. Do you see, you keep reading about return to license Raj, but of course right now a lot of opinion is also polarized, right? But from an academic perspective or from a data perspective, do you see us going back that way. Like, for instance, just to put it into perspective, today itself, and this affects our lives, like Tushar's and mine a little more than yours. OTT platforms have been brought under the INB ministry, right? Which means that now again, sorry, what were you saying?
No, that and plus, no, what's even worse is that digital news platforms have been brought under 26% FDI, which is going to screw a lot of digital news platforms and aggregators.
Yes.
So does this mean, are we going back towards where we were? Are we going back to the 70s? Where the government says, okay, we're going to do this now, and with a stroke of a pen, as they say, like the way, like for instance,
Indira Gandhi nationalized. They're adding now import substitutions. Import restrictions.
Yeah,
the way that was my question. Have we hit it there?
I'm glad you asked me that, right? Because that was what I was going to say, right? 2016, the post-demonetization, when the growth didn't come back, that was a turning point for this government, right? As I was saying, and I went away to the GST kind of digression, but that was a turning point. And nothing that they did after that could get growth back on the track, because it had severely damaged the foundations of the economy, right? The informal sector and agriculture and a whole bunch of things were destroyed, and you couldn't get back. And of course, even global conditions are not very conducive for high growth rate, etc. That made them realize that if we can't do all of those reforms, remember, as I said, the first 2 years there were reforms. After that, there's none. Right? Yeah. Because now they said, okay, we can't do it the reform way. We can't get growth back on track. We will do what we know best, which is command and control. Right? So command and control again. Back to a lot of things which was government intervention and so on. And this is, of course, two things. And I just have to mention this here. That is when also a lot of the distractions began. Right? The community-based distraction, the polarization, the extreme fake news thing, the lynchings, etc. All of those things are wonderful distractions when your economy is not doing well. And when I say wonderful, I mean only for the people in power, not for anyone else who are subjected to it, right? And so all of that on the political and social side, again, as I said, I'm going to keep away deliberately, because that, if we all, I think, start getting triggered by it, we can speak another 2 hours on that, right? So let's not do that and try to keep focus. Yeah. On the economic front, that is when, again, so there's a whole bunch of things. We put price caps on medical devices, on stents. We put price caps on hip joints and on kneecaps, and we put price caps on, a whole bunch of things, right? In Karnataka, there was a BJP government which put price cap on movie theater tickets, and so on and so forth, right? So we realized, now you can't control this. Let me make popular moves. Let me make more and more popular moves, right? Things which people will cheer at initially, who have no clue of understanding of economics, which will come and bite you back. We put import restrictions. And remember, this has got, the BJP as a party has huge support base of small traders and licenses, right? So small traders association, etc., by and large support BJP government. So can I do something to consolidate that vote after what we did with demonetization? So then we said, okay, we will, massively hurt imports again. So there was a lot of import restrictions on we put tariffs on electronic items, and we've been increasing tariffs on electronic items, right? So we don't import as much from China, but instead why can't we do it here? But more importantly, and I think this was the big shot that they took, is the small change in FDI rule, which basically screwed over Amazon and Walmart.
That was the big one, yeah.
Right, which says that you can't have inventory if you are a foreign player who's a platform here, right? And by the way, so Jio could do it. Let's never forget Jio in all of this. So Reliance could have an inventory-based model even if they're a platform, but Amazon and Flipkart can't, right? So you draw whatever conclusions you want from that. So a whole bunch of things we started putting. By the way, we banned, and I just want to say this because it's one of my favorite examples, just going back to that mentality, right? Yeah. We banned dairy products coming from the US. Do you know why? Because...
Amul.
Yeah, I mean, that is the real... what was the reason stated?
Then?
Because cows in the US are not vegetarians.
Are you serious?
I'm not kidding.
This is what I'm saying, no?
Wait, guys, this is what I'm saying. Sorry. This was officially stated.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yes. Okay, so this was...
we're trying to like use logic and all over here. We're trying to use like, who benefits, and using Latin principles of logic and so on and so forth. And then you have confronted with this stupidity. Then what do you say?
The idea is that cows in the US are fed this processed, this thing which contains a little bit of meat, etc. So therefore the milk is polluted. And now I will say this, right? Let people. I mean, I'm fine with people not wanting to drink milk from US cows. I'm absolutely fine. I mean, if you think that,
fair,
fine. It's your beliefs, etc. But the government has no business in banning this, right? All you could do is, like we have with every other product, for instance, put a bloody red, green, and purple mark on it, right? Let people decide. But if that is, by the way, extremely low price, but extremely nutritious thing. And with the amount of people we have in poverty, if you can get lower price milk for them, why are you stopping that, right? So, whole bunch of U-turns. And if you look at economic policy, by the way, the government, this particular set of people were one of the big. Modi himself was one of the biggest critics of the NREJ program.
Yeah.
And then big U-turn, double down on NREJ. Right, massive increase in spending on NREJ. The same thing with your farm loan waivers, for instance. So it was not the union government, but the same set of people. I think in UP you had a big farm loan waiver. You had a farm loan waiver in Maharashtra, in Karnataka, etc. All BJP governments, by the way.
Yeah.
Right, the same set of people who had massively condemned the 2009 farm loan waiver. I'm saying all farm loan waivers are wrong, irrespective of which party, but that's what was there, right? And then you had a whole bunch of subsidies which were supposed to be rationalized, which were not. Only one or two good things there, which is finally there was rationalization of diesel prices. It was deregulated, which is a good thing, but that is amongst a whole bunch of other things which were not necessarily so, right? You had one rank, one pension. You had so all of this put together. Now back to the fiscal deficit numbers. Initially, this government was absolutely committed to maintaining that FRBMA rule, right? 3% of GDP. Never. It didn't stick. We are way beyond that target. The stated fiscal deficit is about 3.5%. But that's the other really sad thing that has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. No data.
We don't believe them. Yeah, we don't believe the numbers anymore.
Right. So you've got the GDP data is absolutely unbelievable now, right? Because Arvind Subramaniam, who was the economic advisor or head of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, himself wrote a paper which says that the real GDP growth is at least 2 percentage points below what was stated. And this was when the stated GDP number was 4.5%. So he says that the real GDP number is about 3%, right? Fiscal deficit numbers, I've done my calculations. I've written about this in Deccan Herald. You guys don't mind if I
plug
my own article,
no,
right?
No.
Whatever you need.
Please do.
Yeah, so I've written about this, and there's, according to my calculations, is about 5% the fiscal deficit, not what they state as 3.5%. So numbers are numbers.
I think there was also a claim that they've put a lot of the deficit on the books of the PSUs or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you do it. So there's a whole bunch of what you would call as creative accounting. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of creative accounting going on. I don't want to get into all of that, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of funny trickery things going on. So numbers are no longer believable. So on the economic front, I mean, I think we'll end here probably. No. We still have to talk about the pandemic, but on the economic front, I think after 2016 and the demonetization was a failure, they gave up and they resorted to the oldest tricks in the book, which is again trying to control things, doing populist things, and so on.
Bread and circuses, basically.
Yeah. So the economy, I mean, India is still a dynamic country with, huge percentage of young population. You still have some kind of entrepreneurial spirit. So it'll grow at 3-4%. I don't think that is a problem, but it's a massive fall from the potential that we had, which is at least 7 to 8%. Is that something you got to think?
Also something I'm assuming that we require to reduce our poverty rate.
Yeah.
Like high growth is needed.
Absolutely. I mean, our calculations again is that every 1% growth in GDP, right? Every additional 1% growth in GDP brings out at least 2 million people out of poverty. And that's not a small number. So the other way of saying it is that if we are growing at least 4% below what we are growing, then that means we have prevented about 8 million people coming out of poverty this year. Right? So that's something to consider.
Wow.
Man.
And then, sorry, go on.
Really, like when all is said and done, right? Like in the future, at some point in the future, in some way, people will be discussing this, and they'll probably not have any answers,
Yeah.
Or maybe, like I said, there will be like or someone will do a tell-all and investigate the minds of the people who put these crackpot policies together. But tell me something, Anupam. Is there, like, right now in the government, right? With the previous government, with the UPA government, and even with governments in the past, there was always a brain trust, right? Like the UPA had the National Advisory Council, and even the Vajpayee government had a lot of global economists and people who were masters at their area, like advising the government, with the government listened to. The way at least it's being reported right now, is that there doesn't seem to be anyone left, who's helping the government out.
No, I don't think so. I think this is really sad, right? I think the present kind of dispensation has systematically thrown out or driven away all those people who could at any point provide sane advice.
Very anti-intellectual attitude.
Anti-intellectual, right? There is there's a deliberate kind of narrative that intellectuals are bad. I mean, that they're of no value, right? And in fact, they're evil. Being an intellectual is equal to being evil in this country.
Yeah, there was that famous quote from him, no? The
hard work.
Hard work.
Yeah, all of those things. But anyway, so that's the thing. And I mean, you got the same thing in the opposition as well. Rahul Gandhi surrounds himself with people that say things that he likes. Modi does the same, but only thing is Modi is in government, right? And so unfortunately, I don't think there is a think tank or there's a set of people that listen to. I mean, now if you look at the members of the Economic Advisory Council, I don't think it's really filled with people who can tell him how to get India out of this rut and onto a high growth path, right? I don't think, or he doesn't. And if someone suggests something that he doesn't like, he won't listen to it.
Yeah, it's like we are seeing it now in real time, right? With the collapse and fall of the Trump, the Trump cabinet and the Trump, the way that they had to scrape the bottom of the barrel. Literally, we were talking about it the other day. That the people who in the Trump administration are they're not even in the barrel; they are underneath the barrel. At this point.
Yeah.
And
so
you were saying?
No, I mean, I don't know, but probably out of character and out of style for the last, as to what's happened in the last two episodes, but it's probably ending it on a slightly positive note, right?
Okay.
The pandemic and what has happened since, the massive drop in GDP, etc. And I think that was on expected lines. Even the lockdown didn't really work out. But I don't really blame anyone for it. It's very difficult to know in hindsight as to what can work, what doesn't, etc. So forget about that aspect. But at least it's brought about an urgency for some reforms, and we saw glimpses of it. We saw glimpses of it in terms of land reform. We saw glimpses of it in labor reforms taken by states. There's a little bit of understanding of that something needs to be done. We can't go out in this thing, and so there's some bit of reforms that are happening. And hopefully that's not just something, even there, they said it's for a period of 2 years, etc., 3 years. I hope it's more than just that. These are real reforms that come about, right? And that can, I think that's the only kind of positive that I can see from now.
Yeah. No, but then you also have a situation that people who call for reforms are then considered are like dissenters and so on and so forth. So I'm not very optimistic, to be honest.
And also it depends on like election results, right? Like if they win, then they go through. If they don't win, then again, command and control keeps coming back more. So
yeah,
I guess it's all luck now.
Right now, you know what? If the podcast is still a medium, in another maybe 5 years' time, I think we'll call Anupam again and be like, now what are your thoughts? Now what are your thoughts?
I thought you would call me sooner than that. But okay.
No, that episode will be 5 years from now. No, that one. That
episode, yeah.
The callback episode.
The callback episode, yeah, as they call it.
Actually, while doing this, I realized I think we probably at some point need to do specific episodes just on GST and demonetization.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what demonetization? What will we do? We'll be like, oh, it was.
I think it'll just be 2 hours of us going like, "Ye kya tha? Ye kya tha? Why you do this, buddy? Why you do this?"
Yeah. Why?
There are times where I'll randomly think and I'll be like, "Oh, why did you ruin everything?" You were doing well. Things were looking up again.
There's about 1.2 billion people who will do the same. So you can do it in a coordinated way, but yeah.
No, and then there are these perspectives, right? I remember reading an editorial, I think in the Wall Street Journal, if I'm not mistaken, or it was a very prominent financial and a very reputable, very calm financial publication. And they were like, this is the largest and most widespread theft of private property in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, damn, they're right. They're right. This is exactly what has happened.
Exactly. Right.
But thank you, Anupam, for joining us.
Thank you, Anupam, for joining us.
I think, and thank you for trying to give an optimistic spin at the end.
It was a desperate attempt.
as hard as it was. Yeah. But thank you so much, because I think this has been probably one of the most informative podcasts that we've done, and we've done 2 episodes of it. And I think this is actually a good summary for a lot of people who are trying to figure out just the economic history of this country. So thank you so much, and we will hopefully have you again here soon to discuss maybe happier economic things.
Yeah, if we find those.
Yeah, let's hope, man. Let's be optimistic that something will show up at some point.
Yeah.
And thanks so much, Anupam. And before we go, I would just like to say, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Anupam, your social media handles are?
On Twitter, I'm at Anupam Manur.
All right. And Joel, yours are?
On Twitter, I am Pereira Joel, and on Instagram, I am joelpereira.esq.
All right. And I am John Please on Twitter, and Tushar_Ravi on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. See you next time. Bye.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one, or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are 2 passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to the Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit. Are you constantly seeking happiness? Wondering how to make the most of every day? How not to let your inhibitions stop you from achieving your goals? It's now time to get your A game on. It's time to unlock your true potential. Tune in to the Empowering series with me, Zarina Poonawalla, to feel empowered in all genres of life. From behavioral skills to management skills. From health to relationships. From mental well-being to emotional well-being. And of course, your finances. I've got you covered. With these tips and tricks from me, Zarina, and true life stories from my amazing guests, you're bound to bring your purest to the table. Tune in to the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.